Hello and welcome to our Midday Report here on TVP World. My name is Diana Skaya. Ukraine is not grateful enough for Poland's help. Well, this is Polish President Karol Nawrocki's stance as he made Poland's position clear to his Ukrainian counterpart, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, who is in Warsaw today. Now, speaking at a joint press conference, Nawrocki said that many Poles feel their country's wide-ranging support for Ukraine has not always been properly appreciated or understood in Kyiv. And he also added that Ukraine now has the tools to address those concerns. At the same time, both leaders stressed that Russia is actively trying to undermine what they described as traditionally warm relations between Poland and Ukraine. Let's now cross live to the presidential palace where our reporter Piotr Miszczuk is. He's there on site. Hello, Piotr. Well, it's quite a big day for Ukraine's president being here in Warsaw. Piotr, I want to ask you, what do you make of the press conference that was held? What more details can you tell us?
So this meeting is good news for Poland, it's good news for Ukraine, and bad news for Russia. That's according to Polish President Karol Nawrocki. He said that both Ukrainian and Polish stances fully align when it comes to the diplomatic efforts related to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. They also said that they will continue the close cooperation in terms of logistics as well as investment. But they also discussed some more difficult issues.
Polls have the impression, which is reflected in opinion polls, in a certain general atmosphere, which you, Mr. Ambassador, are well aware of, that our efforts and multifaceted assistance to Ukraine in the wake of the start of the full-scale invasion have not been properly appreciated and understood. This was also one of the topics of our discussions with the President.
They also spoke about the exhumations, which is another contentious issue between Poland and Ukraine, the exhumations of the victims of the World War II massacre in the Volhynia region. And the exhumations are set to continue. Also, Zelenskyy invited Nawrocki for his visit to Kyiv. He also said that he is grateful that Poland has always been by Ukraine's side, and he said that this cooperation, especially in the military realm, will be more intensive.
Ukraine can offer Poland expertise on countering drone attacks. We know how to defend against all types of drones that could be used today. Furthermore, we are ready to continue dialogue with Poland regarding threats from Belarus. Ukraine can also offer cooperation in terms of maritime security, which I mentioned, and I invited President Nawrocki to visit Ukraine.
This was definitely the most important meeting on today's agenda of President Zelenskyy because he met with President Nawrocki, who assumed office in August. This was their first meeting, and President Nawrocki is more Ukraine skeptical than his predecessor, Andrzej Duda. Now, President Zelenskyy is in the Polish parliament. He is meeting with the speakers of both houses of the Polish parliament. Then he'll meet with his close ally, Prime Minister Donald Tusk. But we'll be monitoring closely the ongoing developments. Back to the studio.
Thank you so much, Piotr Miszczuk. I was going to ask you about Zelenskyy's next steps, but you laid it out for us beautifully. We will be coming back to you throughout the day. Piotr Miszczuk, thanks for being with us. And now I'm joined in studio by Marcin Zaborowski, the Europe editor for TVP World, to discuss this further. Marcin, thanks for being here on such an important event here.
Thank you for having me.
Marcin, I want to ask you, this is the first bilateral meeting between President Zelenskyy, President Karol Nawrocki. We already heard, the Polish president give his, give certain statements, right? Certain things that he said at the press conference. I want to know what you make of it. What stood out to you? What are the key takeaways? Is this, what happened here?
Well, first of all, it's been a long time coming because President Nawrocki assumed office in August. We are in December, so many months have passed, and the two gentlemen have not met yet. So, but just kind of shows the order of priorities for Mr. Nawrocki. And in fact, the meeting today happened because President Zelenskyy said that he would be happy to come to Poland if he was to be invited. So to which President Nawrocki had almost no diplomatic choice
than to actually invite him to
Warsaw. Please do come in. So Well, the expectations were not very high. For example, the National Security Advisor of President Nawrocki, Mr. Zelenskyy, said that if the two gentlemen, if the chemistry between them is improved, that already will be a success.
So has it improved, Martin?
Well, we don't know it yet, but, looking at what we all saw during the press conference and during the greetings and so on, the chemistry wasn't great, I would say. The body language was nothing like you have a body language between President Zelenskyy, President Macron, or Chancellor Schröder, not Schröder, but Merz, Chancellor, or the Prime Minister of UK, or the Prime Minister of Poland. Here there was a kind of a visible distance, I would say. But judging by the way the press conference went, the relationship remains correct. But I would say that President Nawrocki has a dilemma. He's got a problem.
Let me ask you, before we get into the problem further, I mean, you did mention some leaders' name, but I want to ask you, what do you think Moscow is thinking about this meeting right now?
Moscow doesn't like it, and I think that, yes, President Nawrocki was right when he said that this is a good day for our country, it's not such a great day for Russia, because obviously Russia operates on the basis of divide and rule. And the more problems you have between Poland and Ukraine, the better it is for Russia, not least because Poland is absolutely essential for the delivery of military aid to Ukraine. Ukraine would be defenseless had it not been for logistical hubs which exist on the Polish territory.
Marcin, let me ask you, Nawrocki did say that many quote-unquote Poles feel that their support for Ukraine has not been fully appreciated. Can we agree with that comment? Are Poles beginning to feel tired and beginning to feel fatigue from this war? I mean, what's the message behind this?
That sentiment is in the existence, and that's not hugely surprising because it's been over 3 years since this war started. As President Nawrocki pointed out, Poland made some major contributions to the defense of Ukraine. There have been refugees here. They've been very well assimilated. 78% of refugees work, which is amazing. That's the highest number anywhere in Europe. But yes, I mean, it's a very visible presence. Somebody who lives in Warsaw, you know it very well. Yeah? You go to a bar, to a restaurant, to a bank, to a doctor, and you hear Ukrainian or Russian speaking Ukrainians, everywhere. So it's been a cultural change, and obviously not everybody is welcoming of that. And in fact, President Nawrocki, that's why I go back to the issue of the dilemma that he has, because he's been feeding on this Ukrainian skeptic sentiment during his campaign and after his campaign. He ran essentially on anti-Ukrainian platform.
Right.
He broke off from the consensus that we had in this country.
So do you think, just very briefly, Marcin, so do you think that Zelenskyy now is trying to somewhat patch this relationship up?
I think that Zelenskyy is trying to patch this relationship up. I think that President Nawrocki also realizes that, it's a different thing to run a campaign and different thing to actually be the president. So he's trying to be presidential, but it's not coming easy to them. So I can tell that, that, like I said, the chemistry between the two gentlemen doesn't seem to be great.
We have yet to see how the rest of the day will unfold and what will come out of this entire meeting. Thank you so much, Marcin Zawodowski, Europe editor at TVP World, for being here with me on Midday Report. Friday morning saw European Union leaders agree to provide a loan of 90 billion euros to Ukraine to meet the country's military and economic needs for the next 2 years. Now, the move comes after an EU summit in Brussels rejected the idea of using frozen Russian assets to raise the funds for the war-torn country. And now I'm joined live by our Brussels correspondent, Angela Skujins. Angela, good afternoon. Now, please do tell us, what finally pushed EU leaders here to come to terms, to agree to join borrowing? And right away, I will ask you, why do you think was the option of using frozen Russian assets actually ruled out for the time being?
Good afternoon, Diana. So that question lies with the 27 EU heads of state. Only they know why the option of using those immobilised Russian state assets to give Ukraine the cash it needs, why this pitch was in turn defeated. At the tail end of those talks, roughly at 3 a.m, news broke that after 17 hours of intense debate, the EU leaders agreed to give Ukraine a €90 billion loan. We're talking about borrowed money from the financial markets backed by the long-term budget, aiming to give Ukraine the cash it needs to prop up its budget from 2026 and 2027, as well as to continue repelling Russian aggression. We're talking about money required to pay teachers as well as nurses and to buy the weaponry and ammunition required to continue pushing back Russia. Although this is not the option that many EU leaders desired, we know the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen were some of the most staunch They were some of the most staunch advocates for this pitch. It was in turn defeated, probably because of the Belgian Prime Minister Bart de Wever. We heard from our diplomatic sources all throughout the day that even if what he desired materialised, we're talking about those three key criteria, he still wouldn't think that this would be a good idea. But according to top Brussels brass, the outcome is a good one for Ukraine.
The Union reserves its right to make use of the immobilised asset to repay this loan. At the same time, we gave a mandate to the Commission to continue working on the reparation loan based on Russian immobilised assets. On top of that, we have agreed to roll over our sanctions against Russia. Our goal is not to prolong the war. In fact, today's decisions are a crucial contribution to achieve a just and lasting peace in Ukraine.
Similarly to the reparations loan, very important here, Ukraine would only need to pay back the loan once it receives reparations. Until then, the immobilized Russian assets will remain immobilized, and the Union reserves its right to make use of the cash balances to finance the loan.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and European Council President Antonio Costa speaking there of the outcomes of that crucial European Council summit that took place on Thursday, stretching well into Friday morning. What happens next? The German Chancellor stated he expects the cash to start flowing as early as mid-January. This is cash crunch time. We know that Ukraine is staring down the barrel of that shortfall from April. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy welcomed the proposal on Telegram. He stated that this is significant support that strengthens our resilience. We know that Hungary, the Czech Republic and Slovakia received a carve-out from this. They're the only EU member states that aren't expected to pitch in financially when it comes to the money. Bigger questions remain regarding whether this has driven a wedge within the 27 EU member states. But sources that I've spoken to in the run-up to this existentially important meeting is that Washington is watching. Whether this will mean that the United States can step up and offer more support to the war-torn country is the question on everyone's lips. Back to you, Diana.
Angela, well, it's been quite an intense week for Ukraine and for President Zelenskyy. Thank you so much for your report. We shall be coming back to you later on. And now, staying on that subject, let's now hear reactions coming out of Kyiv.
Handing over Russia's frozen assets will be a trigger for Russia. But whatever they decide, the key thing is that they give us money. The form it takes doesn't matter. What matters for Ukraine is that the money comes through. I understand that not everyone supports this idea. Perhaps they are afraid and do not want to escalate tensions with Russia. That's how I see it. That's why they gave their own money for now and will reassess it later, depending on how Russia will act.
What matters most is that they're supporting Ukraine. If using their own funds is easier than using Russia's frozen assets, that's their decision, and they're right. They fear that if Russia's assets are used to fund Ukraine, their own businesses could suffer.
No media, no fanfare. U.S. President Donald Trump has signed a sweeping defense spending bill despite having reservations on its key provisions, including minimum troop numbers in Europe and continued financial aid to Ukraine. Congress, however, effectively forced the issue, leaving President Trump little choice but to sign the bill into law.
Following approval by the U.S. House of Representatives, the Senate on Thursday passed the National Defense Authorization Act with bipartisan support. Not long after, despite going against many of his defense and foreign policies, President Donald Trump signed the bill into law, without fanfare and behind closed doors. The 3,000-page document mostly authorizes over $900 billion in military spending for 2026. That's $8 billion more than Trump initially wanted to earmark for the military. The bill, however, also has provisions that Trump is not keen on. It includes a minimum of 76,000 U.S. troops to be stationed in Europe. That while the White House has already moved to reduce troop numbers in Romania. The law also authorizes the Baltic security initiatives and provides $175 million to support Latvia, Lithuania and Estonia's defense. And it bars the US European commander from giving up the title of NATO Supreme Commander. In contrast, the White House's national security strategy aims to reduce commitments to European defense and NATO. Crucially, the new law earmarks $800 million in minimum aid for Ukraine over the next 2 years, even while Trump is significantly pressuring Kyiv to accept far-reaching concessions to Russia. It goes almost without saying that the president is not entirely enthusiastic about the defense bill.
Although I am pleased to support the critical objectives of the Act, I note that certain provisions of the Act raise concerns. Certain provisions of the Act purport to dictate the position of the United States in external military and foreign affairs. Other provisions of the Act purport to require that the Congress receive a certification, notification, or report before the President directs certain military or diplomatic actions, including the withdrawal of troops below a minimum number in particular theaters.
Congress is defying the president here, and it's the both sides of the Congress. It's not just the Democrats, because Congress, let's remind our viewers, is controlled by the Republicans. So it's the conservative Republicans who are not in agreement with the president on the issue as fundamental as support for Ukraine.
Despite his opposition, Trump politically had little choice to sign the bill. The National Defense Authorization Act has been continuously passed every year for 65 years. Trump tried once before to veto the bill during his first term in 2020. That veto was, however, later overruled. It is broadly expected that Congress would have the votes for overruling a Trump veto this time around as well.
And moving on now, well, Sweden is living through one of its darkest periods in nearly a century, as the country has seen the least amount of sunlight during December in years.
Sweden is experiencing extremely low levels of sunlight this December. It's been reported that throughout the whole month, the residents would only see the sun for a total of around 28 minutes.
It's quite cloudy, there's rain, not much snow, and not much sun either.
You don't want to work, you just want to sleep.
A prolonged lack of sunlight exposure has negative impact on both physical and mental health. It leaves people foggy and lacking energy, making daily chores troublesome.
It just doesn't give you that little boost you'd get if there was sunshine in the morning when you wake up or leave the house. It's a bit monotonous and gray.
But fortunately, there are ways to support your mental health in these conditions. And some people say they are not that susceptible to mood changes during prolonged periods of gloomy weather.
We have vitamins for children. They have little drops to take in the morning. We have little capsules that look like this. Lack of sunlight can affect your mood, leading to depression, anxiety, and sleep disorders. It depends on whether you are susceptible to what is known as seasonal affective disorder. This is not the case for everyone.
While December in Sweden is set to be one of the darkest months in nearly a century, the weather outside of the country is not much better.
And that's all for our edition of Midday Report here in TVP World. I'm Diana Skaya. Thanks for watching, and do stay with us here as we keep you updated on President Volodymyr Zelensky's latest visit to Warsaw. Thanks for watching.